My wife told me I was boring and predictable, that I would never leave her. I surprised her with divorce papers on our anniversary. There's nothing worse than discovering what someone really thinks of you. You spend your whole life believing someone loves you for who you are, only to find out none of it was real. It hurts like nothing else. Sorry if this sounds very pessimistic, I'm still quite raw about all of this. For months, I had my suspicions. The little lies, the schedules that never quite added up, a lie she claimed to be living, yet one that never seemed to exist anywhere. Then one night, with her asleep beside me, I decided to see it all for myself. I'm a 31-year-old man who met my wife, a 30-year-old woman, 10 years ago when we were both in university. We were polar opposites in a sense. I was quiet and reserved, always in my dorm studying and reading. She was a social butterfly with a magnetic personality, making friends effortlessly and loving to go out and have fun, you know the type. Her social media profiles were full of cocktail photos, group pictures, and restaurant selfies. Our relationship shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. We had the usual ups and downs, some disagreements and fights, but nothing out of the ordinary. I truly felt we would go the distance. We got married 2 years after graduating. I had landed a good job, and she was taking some time to figure out her career path. I didn't mind at the time, I was earning well. She had studied education in university but decided she didn't like the prospects in that field, so I supported her while she explored her options. At first, it felt like a team effort. She'd talk about wanting to start a business or go back to school, and I believed her. That's what marriage was supposed to be, right? Supporting each other and being there for one another. However, a few years passed and nothing changed. She still wasn't pursuing anything concrete, just jumping from one idea to the next without any results. Meanwhile, I worked hard to cover the bills and save for our future. We talked about this often, and I'd tell her she needed to focus and make a plan. She would always assure me she was close to figuring it out. But looking back, I realized she was just buying time. Some might think I was spoiling her, but it was a sore subject. We fought about it often, and I grew frustrated with her lack of direction. She seemed to start something only to drop it after a few months because it didn't feel right. So, when she told me she wanted to start studying law, I was a bit skeptical. She noticed my hesitation and insisted she was serious. It turned out she had applied and been accepted. She even showed me an acceptance letter. All she needed was for me to pay the tuition, and she'd be a law student. I was so thrilled she was finally making a decision that I agreed immediately. At the time, she told me the semester would start in about 3 months. I tried to stay on top of things, asking her if she had everything she needed. I genuinely wanted her to succeed in law school. I didn't want to give her any chance to back out of this too. She told me she was eager to start, and I completely believed her. It wasn't until the semester was supposed to have begun that I noticed strange behavior. She was going out quite frequently but never seemed as busy as I'd expect a law student to be. I also never saw her reading. When I asked about her classes, she'd say everything was fine and she wasn't studying because they were still in the introductory part. That sounded reasonable enough to believe. The problem was, she was going out almost every day. There was no real reason to suspect she was lying to me. If I asked about her classes or her day, she always had a story ready. She'd talk about classmates, professors, the whole narrative was solid and coherent. You know how it is when your partner tells you about their day and their coworkers, and you start to feel like you know those people? That's how it was for me with her classmates. The only problem was, none of those people existed. I realized this when she started getting careless. She began coming home late, telling me she had a study group that met at night. Again, that sounded legitimate enough, until one night she came home very late and clearly more than a little drunk. She told me the same story about the study group and said they'd gone for drinks afterward. This time, I didn't buy it. She had never come home that late, and never that drunk. I got a bit confrontational and asked her where her textbooks were. At first, she stammered, then told me she had left them with a friend who picked them up for her. In my bones, I knew she was lying to my face. So I asked her to show me some pictures she'd taken with her friends that night. Even being that drunk, she looked shocked. She stammered as she told me she hadn't taken any pictures. That's when I was completely sure she was lying. Every time we went out together, she took dozens of pictures. She always needed photos of herself, of us together, of her food. There was no way she had gone out with friends and not taken a single picture. I made my disbelief clear and asked her if she had really gone out with friends. She insisted she had and started listing the people she'd been with, the same names she'd mentioned before. She was so indignant and tearful that I actually started to believe her and feel bad. We had a small argument about it, and I backed down. She really was very drunk, and after an hour or two, she was sound asleep. That's when I made my decision. She was a heavy sleeper when she drank. Once she was out, I knew nothing short of an alien invasion would wake her. I checked her phone and looked through her photos. As expected, there were no pictures from that night. I found that really strange. She'd had drinks that night and would have at least taken a photo of the cocktail she'd ordered. I sat with her phone, trying to find a way to discover where she had been that night. Then I remembered her friends, the three names she mentioned frequently: Sarah, Amy, and Jane. I searched for those names in her contacts and found nothing. Red flag number 2. Now I was sure nothing was as it seemed. Those people didn't exist, and I began to doubt she was even a student. I went into her emails and searched for correspondence with the university. I expected to see emails confirming things like admission, payment, and course registration. I only found 3 emails from the university, the first congratulating her on her admission, and the others being reminders to pay the tuition before the semester started. After that, there was nothing else, no emails confirming her payment or congratulating her on completing admission requirements. The implications stunned me. My wife was lying to me about being a student. I don't want to bore you with more details, but I accessed her university's student portal. There was no evidence she had ever logged in. The link was still blue on both her phone and her laptop. The username and password fields weren't autofilled with anything, and the site didn't even appear in her browser history. I was furious. What was she doing during the day? What had she done with the money I gave her? After fuming for a few minutes, I thought I should investigate further. There were still unanswered questions, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. While she was still sound asleep, I started checking her social media messages. It was no surprise to find no messages with classmates, study groups, or professors, just messages with people I didn't know. I checked most of them, and they were pretty boring stuff, until I got to Mark. Mark was different. Their messages went back months. At first, they were flirty, but they quickly became much more explicit. Shortly after, they began exchanging photos. After that, there were messages scheduling meetups. I didn't need a calendar to realize they were meeting when she was supposed to be in class. There was more. It became pretty obvious where the money had gone. She was spending it on hotel visits and trips with this guy. Here I was, thinking I was investing in her future, and it turns out she was spending my money behind my back to sleep with some random guy. I had to restrain myself from waking her up right then. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I was sitting next to a complete stranger. The disbelief I felt was like someone telling me my dog had spoken to them. It was impossible, but the evidence was right there. My wife was not who I thought she was. I couldn't stop scrolling through their messages, even though I would have rather crawled over broken glass than keep reading this garbage. But I had no choice. I needed to be informed. I'd been in the dark for too long. Sometimes I wish I had stopped reading right there. At some point, they started talking about me. There were a lot of complaints about the kind of husband I am. She said I was always busy with work and too tied up to take her to clubs and parties, never mind that I was the only one providing for the household and that I took her on several dates a month. Apparently, that meant nothing if I didn't go out as much as she liked. Seeing her complain about me to another guy infuriated me, but it got worse. Mark asked if she was worried I would find out about them. She responded with a laugh and said I was too weak to leave her, even if I knew. That I was predictable and reliable, and that she believed I would just mope and forgive her, but that I didn't have the courage to leave. I was furious. I knew she had underestimated me. because I considered our relationship over right then and there. I wanted to wake her up and scream at her, but it was useless. She was so drunk I wouldn't get anything useful out of her. I decided to wait until morning to throw everything I had discovered in her face. That night, I slept on the sofa. Overnight, I calmed down a bit, not enough to forgive her, but enough to realize that just confronting her wasn't enough. I wanted to do something that would shatter her. I needed her to feel as miserable as I did. At that moment, 2 weeks had passed since I discovered her lies, and I had begun preparing a little surprise for our anniversary, which is in just 2 months. I will update this post and tell you how it all goes. Update: the anniversary dinner was a total success, at least for me. I don't think she enjoyed it, but I'm sure she won't forget it anytime soon. It was hard staying under the same roof as that woman for another 2 months. I didn't even bother pretending everything was normal, and she noticed. She asked me several times what was wrong, but I gave her vague answers. I didn't have the energy to pretend to be nice to her, and honestly, I enjoyed watching her squirm as she tried to figure out what was bothering me. She probably thought it was a midlife crisis or something, because she kept suggesting we take a vacation. I just told her I was busy with work. Meanwhile, I was busy planning my exit. Finally, our anniversary arrived after what felt like 2 years. I told her I had something special planned. She perked up at the idea of a fancy dinner and was especially happy when I said I'd reserved a table at her favorite restaurant. I wanted everything to be perfect for the night I had planned. She got all dressed up for dinner. She asked me how she looked, and I lied, saying she looked great. I didn't care how she looked anymore. There was no outfit on this planet that could make her beautiful to me again. Dinner started normally enough. We ordered food and wine, chatted about trivial things, and took several pictures. She seemed relaxed, obviously thinking the tension between us had faded. After they served dessert, I decided it was time for business. I handed her the envelope that had been in my jacket pocket all night. At first, she looked excited, probably thought it was a gift or tickets for a vacation. She looked confused when she opened the envelope and found a bill. I knew she wouldn't pay it. It wasn't legally binding or anything like that. I just wanted to send a message, and by the look on her face, she got it loud and clear. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at the paper and started trying to explain herself. I explained that the bill was for the money I'd given her to pay her tuition, and I expected it to be paid back in full. She tried to tell me she really had paid the tuition, but I cut her off and told her not to dig herself in deeper. Watching her stammer like that gave me a touch of satisfaction. People were starting to stare at us, but I didn't care. I knew I'd never come back to this restaurant, and I was happy to ruin this place for her. And I was just getting started. Then, I pulled a large manila envelope from under my seat. I tried to hand it to her, but she didn't move to take it, so I tossed it on the table in front of her. She opened it with trembling hands, and her whole body slumped when she saw what was inside: divorce papers. She went from crying to pleading. She reached out for my hands, begging me to reconsider. She told me she'd pay me back, that she'd really go to university, that she'd get a job, anything to avoid the divorce. I asked her why she was so desperate to stay when she had told Mark I was boring and predictable. I reminded her she had assured him I would never leave her. The tears stopped when she realized I knew everything and understood she was in much deeper trouble than she thought. I wasn't surprised when she started stammering out excuses. She began with the usual nonsense, claiming nothing had happened between them, but quickly switched to "he means nothing to me" once she realized I probably knew the truth. I put her out of her misery and told her I had read all their messages and had sent them to my lawyer. I mentioned I had wanted to put them all in a third envelope but couldn't find one thick enough for everything I had. But I wasn't done. I told her I was moving out the next day. I had booked a motel for that night and would take most of my things the next morning. I had cancelled the cards in my name and had stopped putting money into the joint account ever since I discovered her infidelity. It was almost empty. Good luck to her paying the rent with what little was left. She was making a scene by then, but I didn't care. She was no longer my problem. For the first time since discovering the truth, I felt some peace. I felt like I was taking my life back. I left some money on the table to cover the bill and told her to enjoy the rest of her night. Then I walked out, leaving her there, still sobbing. After that night, I blocked her from everything and let my lawyer handle all communication with her. I didn't want anything more to do with her. The only time we saw each other in person after that was during the divorce proceedings. She and Mark were the stars of the show. My lawyer didn't hesitate to mention the infidelity every time she tried to ask for too much. We also used her financial infidelity as an argument against alimony. Surprisingly, it worked. My lawyer argued there was a case for fraud, which scared her enough to agree to withdraw her requests for alimony entirely. After the divorce, I didn't stick around. I moved out of the city and left her behind. I didn't keep in touch with her, but I heard about her from friends. She couldn't pay the rent and had to move back in with her parents. They threatened to kick her out, and she was still living off them, so she started looking for work as a teacher. She hadn't had much luck, which didn't surprise me. It's not like she had any work experience. Life after divorce is never easy, but I was doing pretty well without her in it. I didn't need the negativity of someone who saw me as a spineless ATM to use and lie to. If she ever needed to talk to me about something, she had to go through my lawyer. He told me she asked him more than once to give her my new number. Naturally, he never did, but it pleased me greatly to know how desperate she was. Still, she managed to get my number somehow. I don't know who gave it to her, but I made the mistake of answering an unknown number and was surprised to hear her faltering voice. My first instinct was to hang up immediately, but I decided to listen. She claimed she just wanted to say hello, but within minutes she was already begging me to take her back. She said she had nothing without me and wanted another chance. I wasn't going to give her another chance to worm her way back into my life. I ended the call without saying a word and blocked that number too. Now I'm much more careful about answering unknown numbers and sharing my details with friends and family. Looking back, I can't believe how blind I was to the red flags. I really did my best to support and empower her, but she repaid me by lying to me and insulting me behind my back. Her betrayal says more about her than it does about me, and I'm glad I proved to her that I wasn't as weak or spineless as she thought. How's that for being predictable?
Reddit Relics comment. What a story. What strikes me most is how the OP used his own predictability, which she saw as a weakness, as his greatest weapon. He planned every detail to reclaim control and walk away with his head held high. In the end, the best revenge was him moving on and rebuilding his life. The lesson? Trust is everything, but never lose yourself for someone who doesn't deserve it.